In the middle of a cost-cutting meeting, Callista Hale, the blonde CEO in her signature red V-neck dress, coldly signed the termination orders. Then, without warning, a payroll statement slipped from the stack of files. Elias Turner, a janitor, consistently transferred half his salary to an Oakland orphanage every month on the 15th, like clockwork. Why would someone barely scraping by give away so much? That question pulled Callista from her glass tower, leading her to the door of Elias's painful memories when he was once a brilliant engineer, then lost everything. And tonight, the company was about to explode, literally. Would the answer about that half paycheck save the company or destroy it? And could a frozen heart thaw before quiet kindness? The morning sun glinted off the glass facade of Sterling Innovations, a towering monument to ambition in the heart of San Francisco's tech district. Inside, the 34th floor hummed with controlled chaos. Engineers clustered around terminals, their screens filled with cascading code and three-dimensional drone simulations. The air carried the sharp scent of coffee and the electric tension of impending deadlines. Callista Hale moved through this world like a blade through silk. At 34, she had already cemented her reputation as the ice queen of aerospace innovation. Her red dress, always red, always that confident V-neck cut, had become as much a signature as her unwavering quarterly targets. The press loved to photograph her against steel and glass, a splash of crimson defiance in a monochrome world. But what the cameras did not capture were the nights she stayed until the cleaning crews arrived, or the way her jaw tightened when she passed the framed photo in her office. A faded snapshot of her mother's failed business, a bakery shuttered by kindness given at the wrong time to the wrong people. Sterling Innovations was hemorrhaging money, 3 consecutive quarters of losses. The board was circling, and the Aegis 5 drone project, their last hope for salvation, was 96 hours away from a make-or-break demonstration for Ether Defense, a contract worth north of $200 million. The company had been founded on a promise to make the skies safer through cutting-edge robotics and aerospace technology. But promises did not pay salaries, and investors only cared about numbers that moved in one direction. 30 floors below Callista's corner office, in the subterranean maintenance corridors that most employees never saw, Elias Turner pushed a cleaning cart with the practiced ease of someone who had done it 1,000 times. He was 36, but looked older, a black single dad with warm brown skin and tight natural curls kept close cropped for practicality. His frame was tall and solid. His dark brown hands were scarred and calloused in ways that suggested a history beyond mop handles and floor wax. Those hands moved with surprising precision when he adjusted the loose panel on an electrical junction box, or when he carefully wiped down the sensor equipment in the robotics lab after the engineers had gone home. Most people only saw another black janitor in a building where executives rarely learned the names of the people who cleaned their offices. Sometimes, late at night, he would pause and stare at the blueprints left on whiteboards, his eyes tracing the elegant mathematics of flight dynamics with an intensity that did not match his janitorial uniform. No one at Sterling Innovations knew that Elias Turner had once been Dr. Elias Turner, lead controls engineer on the Orion program, the black aerospace prodigy whose algorithms had been praised in aerospace journals as the golden touch of computational flight. No one knew that his wife, Dr. Audrey Turner, had died in a laboratory accident 3 years ago, an accident that haunted him every time he closed his eyes. No one knew about the little black girl at home who still sometimes woke up crying for her mother. And certainly no one knew why he donated exactly half his minimum wage paycheck to St. Bridget's orphanage every month without fail. In the boardroom, William Hale, Callista's stepfather and chairman of the board, tapped his pen against the mahogany table with growing impatience. "We are cutting 23 positions from infrastructure," he announced, not looking up from the spreadsheet. "Maintenance, janitorial, facilities management. The deadline is tomorrow." Vivian Cross, Callista's 30-year-old chief of staff, leaned forward with calculated interest. She was sharp as a scalpel and twice as cold, her ambition barely concealed behind a veneer of professional deference. "The optics might be challenging," she said carefully, "but necessary sacrifices often are." Callista signed the document without hesitation. Efficiency was survival. Sentiment was the luxury of companies that were not bleeding out. But then the printer jammed, spitting out papers in a confused jumble. Among them, a payroll statement that should not have been in that stack. Callista picked it up, frowning at the error. Employee Turner Elias. Position Janitorial Services. Gross monthly salary $2,400. Recurring transfer every 15th of the month, $1,200. Recipient St. Bridget's Orphanage, Oakland. 50% every month like clockwork. "What is this?" Callista's voice cut through the low murmur of the meeting. William barely glanced at it. Some bleeding heart trying to buy salvation. PR stunt probably, or tax evasion. But Vivian's eyes narrowed with predatory interest. "We should investigate the purpose of these transfers. Could be something else entirely. A money laundering situation, perhaps." Callista stared at those numbers. $2,400 was barely enough to survive in the Bay Area. Half of that was, she did the quick calculation, the difference between making rent and sleeping in your car, between eating and not eating. Why would someone barely surviving give away so much? That afternoon, she found herself in the marble lobby waiting. She had not planned it, had not scheduled it, but when Elias Turner walked past with his cart, moving with that odd precision she had never noticed before, Callista stepped directly into his path. "Mr. Turner." He stopped. Up close, she could see the details that surveillance cameras missed. The faint chemical burns on his forearms. The way his eyes were intelligent and distant at once. The careful control in every movement. "Ma'am?" His voice was quiet, respectful, giving away nothing. "I saw your payroll statement. The transfers to St. Bridget's." For the first time, something flickered in his expression. Not defensiveness, not pride, something deeper, like old pain, surfacing briefly before being pulled back under. "Is that a problem? I am trying to understand why someone in your position would give away what little I have." He finished her sentence with a gentleness that somehow made the words hurt more. "There are debts that cannot be measured in money, Miss Hale. I am just paying what I owe." Before she could respond, he moved past her, the wheels of his cart squeaking softly against the polished floor. That night, Callista Hale did something she had never done before. She drove to Oakland in the rain, following an address she had pulled from the company's donation records. St. Bridget's Orphanage sat on the edge of the industrial district, a converted rectory with peeling paint and a sign that had weathered too many seasons. She parked across the street, engine off, watching through rain-streaked windows. And then she saw him. Elias Turner, still in his work clothes, was on a ladder fixing a broken gutter. Below, a group of children held umbrellas and a flashlight, calling up instructions. When he climbed down, Leo, a small black boy, maybe 10 years old, ran up with a carefully folded paper airplane. "Uncle Eli, watch it fly now." Elias knelt to examine it, suggesting adjustments to the wing angles with the kind of attention most people reserved for multi-million-dollar prototypes. The boy's dark brown face lit up as he listened. The boy threw it. The plane soared, caught an updraft, and glided gracefully before landing near the fence. The children cheered. Elias smiled, a real smile, the kind Callista hadn't seen on his face at the company. An elderly nun emerged from the building, her habit dark against the warm light spilling from the doorway. She embraced Elias, spoke to him softly. Callista couldn't hear the words, but she saw the grief that crossed his face, the way the nun squeezed his hand. Callista sat in her car for 20 minutes, watching this other world. No cameras, no publicity, just a black man fixing gutters and teaching children about flight. When Sister Constance invited Elias inside for tea, Callista finally stepped out of her car. The rain had softened to a drizzle. She stood at the gate, uncertain, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. "Can I help you?" The nun had noticed her. "I work with Elias at Sterling Innovations." Sister Constance's eyes showed recognition, but not surprise. "Come in from the rain, child. You look like you have questions." Inside, the orphanage was shabby but immaculately clean. Children's artwork covered the walls, crayon drawings of airplanes and stars, brown-skinned astronauts reaching for impossible heights, handprints in every color. Matilda, a small black girl with thick glasses and tight braids, peeked around a corner, then vanished with a giggle. Elias comes every week, Sister Constance explained, setting out chipped teacups. After his wife died, he sold everything, their house, her jewelry, even her wedding ring, to pay the hospital bills and keep his little girl, Amara, cared for. Then he remembered the promise they had made together. Promise? Dr. Audrey Turner was going to sponsor our expansion, turn this place into a real children's center. The nun's voice was steady but sad. She signed the papers the morning of the accident. Elias has been making her dream come true, one paycheck at a time. Callista felt something crack inside her chest. The accident, what happened? Laboratory testing gone wrong. A chain of rare errors in the aerospace facility where they both worked. Safety protocols had been shortened because of deadline pressure. Audrey didn't survive. Sister Constance's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea. Elias blamed himself for not catching the sensor miscalibration. He left engineering that day and never went back. On a shelf, Callista noticed a tin box, slightly rusted. Sister Constance followed her gaze and carefully opened it. Inside, a faded wedding photo of a beautiful black couple, a child's drawing of airplanes with a wobbly A for Amara in the corner, and a blueprint with neat handwriting in the margin, for the kids who will fly. Love. A. Callista stood at the window watching Elias teach the small girl with glasses how to fold paper wings. Outside, her red dress looked wrong, out of place, a costume from a different play. Why does he still come here, she asked. It must hurt. Because pain doesn't excuse us from love, Sister Constance said simply. It requires it. Back at Sterling Innovations, the crisis was escalating. The Aegis 5 drone was malfunctioning during test flights, destabilizing during wind shear, experiencing dangerous oscillations in its yaw axis. The engineering team was working 70-hour weeks, tempers fraying, theories multiplying. In the war room, screens displayed cascading failure logs. George Chen, the lead systems engineer, jabbed at a tablet. It's the sensor fusion algorithm. The Kalman filter is overcorrecting. We've tuned those parameters 6 times, Finn Rogers snapped back. The problem is hardware latency. Dante Williams shook his head. You're both wrong. It's the safety threshold triggers. They're activating prematurely and creating a feedback loop. Callista stood behind the glass partition, watching her best engineers argue in circles. 72 hours until demonstration. $60 million already spent. The company's future balanced on the edge of a knife. And then she noticed him. Elias had come to empty the trash, as he did every evening, but instead of leaving, he stood near the back wall, eyes fixed on the failure analysis displayed across the main screen. His lips moved slightly, as if calculating. In a room full of mostly white and Asian engineers and uniformed observers, the quiet black janitor's presence barely registered until he spoke. Excuse me, his voice was barely audible over the argument. No one heard him. George was getting louder, Finn more defensive. Callista saw Elias's hand reach out, hesitate, then point to a specific section of code on the screen. The noise covariance matrix. You have the measurement update before the time update. It should be inverse. The room went silent. George turned, saw the janitor, and laughed a sharp, dismissive bark. Thanks for the input, but we've got actual engineers handling this. But Callista had seen something else, the way Elias had analyzed the screen, the precision of his technical language, the absolute certainty in his quiet voice. Explain, she said, stepping through the door. Elias looked at her, and for a moment she saw the weight of everything he had walked away from. Your sensor fusion is trying to merge data from GPS, IMU, and barometric sensors simultaneously, but you're updating in the wrong sequence. The prediction step needs to happen first, then the correction phase. Right now, you're correcting noise with noise, creating a cascading delay that manifests as instability under dynamic conditions. The room was silent. George's smile had frozen. You're using a late fusion approach, Elias continued, when you should be using weighted prediction. I would recommend a complementary filter structure for the high-frequency data, then integrate the slower sensors afterward. Finn pulled up the code architecture, ran a simulation with the suggested changes. The oscillation damped, stabilized. How did you... Dante started, but Elias was already heading for the door. Have a good evening, everyone. Callista followed him into the hallway. Wait! He turned. In the fluorescent light, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the resignation. A black man who had learned to stay small in spaces that didn't know what to do with his brilliance. Who are you? Someone who used to know things, he said quietly, before he forgot how to forgive himself. That night, Callista ordered a background investigation. By morning, she had the file spread across her desk. Dr. Elias Turner, MIT doctorate in aerospace controls, lead engineer on the Orion program, author of 12 peer-reviewed papers, holder of 3 patents in autonomous flight systems. And then the accident report, Laboratory Incident AN 2021447, cascade failure due to incomplete sensor calibration protocols. Safety review period shortened from 6 weeks to 10 days due to project timeline pressure. 1 fatality, Dr. Audrey Turner, flight safety engineer. Internal recommendation, no criminal negligence but protocol violations noted. Elias's resignation letter dated the same day. I can no longer, in good conscience, work in an industry that prioritizes schedules over lives. I am responsible for what happened, and I choose to carry that responsibility elsewhere. Callista stared at her reflection in the dark window of her office. How many times had she shortened safety reviews, pushed deadlines, prioritized delivery over caution? The image of her mother flickered in her memory, not the failure she had always focused on, but the kindness, the way she had given food to families who couldn't pay, the gentleness that Callista had learned to call weakness. But what if she had been wrong? On her desk, the termination order still sat unsigned, including Elias's name on the list. She picked up her phone. Vivian, cancel the infrastructure cuts, effective immediately. The next morning, Callista found Elias in the maintenance break room. He was eating a sandwich, reading a dog-eared paperback on quantum mechanics. I want to offer you the position, she said without preamble. Chief of Stabilization Protocols. 30 days, full engineering authority over the Aegis 5 control systems. Salary 5 times your current rate. Elias set down his book slowly. No. Excuse me? I left engineering because I couldn't trust systems that put profit over safety. You want me to fix your drone so you can sell it to the highest bidder. His voice was calm but immovable. I won't do that again. Not for myself, not for my daughter. Callista felt anger flash through her, then something else. Respect. What if I could prove to you that we're doing this for the right reasons? Can you... She thought of St. Bridget's. The children. Sister Constance. The blueprint in the tin box. For the kids who will fly. Give me a chance to show you. That afternoon, Callista did 3 things she had never done before. First, she personally called each employee scheduled for termination and told them their positions were secure, then improved their benefits packages. Second, she established an emergency fund for facility workers, retroactive to the beginning of the year. Third, she transferred $100,000 from her personal account to St. Bridget's orphanage anonymously, with a note for the children who will fly. Vivian watched these decisions with carefully concealed displeasure. The board won't understand. Then I'll explain it to them, Callista replied. But the crisis was far from over. Ether Defense had just sent an ultimatum: demonstrate a successful flight within 72 hours or the contract would be terminated permanently. And 2 days later, during the high-stakes demonstration with military observers present, everything went catastrophically wrong. The Aegis 5 lifted perfectly, its rotors humming in precise harmony. The first 5 maneuvers executed flawlessly. Then a gust of wind hit from an unexpected angle. The drone jerked, overcorrected, began oscillating in a growing sinusoidal pattern. In the control room, alarms shrieked. The pilot on the ground tried to regain command, but the system had entered a feedback loop, every correction making the oscillation worse. Emergency shutdown, George shouted. It's not responding. Finn's hands flew across the keyboard, panic rising in his voice. On the screen, the drone's trajectory showed red. 30 seconds to residential area, 25. Callista's heart hammered. This was it, the end of everything. And then Elias burst through the control room door. He didn't ask permission. He shoved George aside, grabbed the backup controller, and began typing commands faster than anyone in the room could follow. His fingers moved with absolute certainty, muscle memory from another life where he hadn't been the black man with a mop, but the black engineer people quoted in journals. Disabling the safety threshold, he said, switching to manual state estimation, applying weighted late fusion with complementary dampening. That'll crash it, George protested. No, Elias replied, voice utterly calm. That'll save it. The drone steadied, the oscillation damped, the red trajectory line turned yellow, then green. 20 seconds, 15. Callista. Elias didn't look away from the controls. I need full authority. No override. Trust me. Everyone turned to her, the board observers, the military representatives. Her entire future balanced on this moment. She stepped forward and placed her hand on Elias's shoulder. The system is yours. Everyone else, stand down. For 10 seconds, the only sound was the soft clicking of keys and the drone's motors transmitted through speakers. Elias guided it through a descending spiral, bleeding altitude and velocity in perfect harmony. The Aegis 5 touched down on the landing pad with the gentleness of a leaf settling on water. The room erupted. Engineers cheered. The ether defense observers were on their phones immediately. Callista felt her legs weaken with relief. And then she turned and embraced Elias, right there in front of everyone. No calculation, no image management, just gratitude. You saved us, she whispered. I saved them, he corrected, nodding toward the window, toward the city beyond. That's what this should always be about. William Hale stood in the corner watching. His expression was unreadable. That was impressive, he said slowly, but who authorized a janitor to operate critical systems? I did, Callista said, not releasing Elias, and I'd do it again. The following Saturday, Callista drove to St. Bridget, not to observe from a distance this time, but to participate. She found Elias in the courtyard teaching Leo and Matilda, the same black children she had seen before, the principles of aerodynamics with paper airplanes and a box fan. Angle of attack, he explained, adjusting the fold in Leo's plane. Too steep, you stall. Too shallow, no lift. Like people, Matilda said thoughtfully, her braids swinging as she tipped her head. Elias smiled, exactly like people. Callista knelt down beside them, her red dress replaced with jeans and a simple sweater. Can I help? The children looked at Elias, who nodded. Soon, Callista found herself folding wings, testing flight patterns, laughing when her plane nosedived into the grass. It had been years, decades, since she had done something with no purpose beyond joy. Later, while the children showed Sister Constance their improved designs, Elias and Callista sat on the porch steps, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. I used to think giving was weakness, Callista said quietly. My mother's business failed because she couldn't say no to people who needed help. I watched her lose everything. And you learned the wrong lesson, Elias replied gently. What should I have learned? That giving without wisdom is reckless, but refusing to give at all is worse. He looked at her. Your mother's problem wasn't generosity, it was boundaries. There's a difference. Matilda appeared at Callista's elbow, eyes wide. Are you Uncle Eli's wife? The question hung in the air. Callista felt her face flush. Elias's hand went unconsciously to the chain around his neck, where his wedding ring still hung on a thin cord. No, sweetheart, he said softly. Miss Hale is my friend. But the way he said friend made Callista's heart do something it hadn't done in years. That night, as she drove back to the city, she realized she had spent the entire afternoon without checking her phone once, without calculating return on investment, without measuring everything against quarterly projections. She had simply been human. But humanity, she was about to discover, came with complications. On Monday morning, Vivian Cross requested an urgent meeting. Her expression was carefully neutral, but Callista had learned to read the subtle tells. The way her chief of staff's left hand drummed against her thigh when she was concealing something important. We have a problem, Vivian said, closing the office door. I've been reviewing the system logs from the Aegis 5 incident. She pulled up a file on the wall screen. Lines of code, access timestamps, IP addresses. Someone altered the Kalman filter parameters 3 days before the demonstration. The changes were subtle but deliberate, designed to cause instability under specific wind conditions. Callista felt ice flood her veins. Sabotage. The modifications were made from George Chen's account, but he was at an off-site conference that day. Vivian's fingers moved across the screen. However, I traced the actual IP address to a workstation in this building. The screen changed and Callista's blood turned colder. The IP address belonged to Vivian's own computer. Before you say anything, Vivian said quickly, I can explain. I was approached by Corbin Aerospace 6 months ago. They wanted insights into our control algorithms, I thought. You sold us out. Callista's voice was dangerously quiet. I secured my future, Vivian corrected. You're running this company on sentiment and fairy tales now, donating to orphanages, canceling necessary cuts, putting janitors in command of multi-million-dollar systems. This company was already dying. I just expedited the inevitable. And you were willing to kill people to do it. Oh, please. I calculated the risk. The demonstration was controlled. The worst case would have been equipment damage, maybe some bad press. Then I would have stepped in, discovered the sabotage, blamed it on George, and positioned myself as the hero who saved the company. Vivian's mask had finally dropped. Corbin promised me COO, real power, not this bleeding heart nonsense you've turned Sterling into. Callista stood slowly. You have 2 choices. Resign immediately and we'll keep this quiet. Or I call the authorities and you face criminal charges for industrial espionage and sabotage. You can't prove anything without exposing that you let an unqualified employee operate critical systems. Vivian smiled. We're at a stalemate, Callista. Take the deal. Let me leave quietly or we both go down. For a long moment, Callista said nothing. Then she reached for her phone. I'm calling the board and the FBI and our lawyers. She met Vivian's eyes. I'm done making compromises with people who put profit over principle. Whatever consequences I face for trusting Elias, I'll face them because he was right and you were wrong. And if this company can't survive doing the right thing, then maybe it doesn't deserve to survive. Vivian's confidence cracked. You're destroying everything. No, Callista replied. I'm finally building something worth keeping. Within 4 hours, federal agents had seized Vivian's computers. Her communications with Corbin Aerospace filled hundreds of pages, detailed plans, technical specifications, payment schedules. The betrayal was comprehensive and unambiguous. The emergency board meeting lasted 6 hours. William Hale sat silent for most of it, watching his stepdaughter defend every decision she had made. When she finished, he spoke for the first time. I've spent 40 years in this industry, he said quietly. I've seen companies rise and fall on nothing but quarterly numbers. I taught you to think that way, Callista, to measure everything by efficiency and return. He paused. I was wrong. You've shown me what I forgot. That the numbers serve the mission, not the other way around. I'm proud of you. It was the first time he had said those words in 20 years. The board voted unanimously to pursue charges against Vivian Cross and to implement a new company-wide ethics framework. But more importantly, they voted to restructure Sterling Innovations around a different principle, human-centered engineering. And they voted to make Elias Turner the founding director of the new initiative. The first time many people on the factory floor had seen a black engineer's name at the top of an org chart, instead of on a badge that said facilities. Callista found him that evening in the robotics lab, where he had been working for 16 straight hours. The Aegis 5 sat on the test stand, but now its systems were being rebuilt with layers of redundant safety protocols, each one designed to prevent exactly the kind of deadline pressure that had killed Audrey. The board approved everything, she said, sitting beside him. New division, human-centered flight laboratory. You'll lead it. Your only mandate is to make things safe. No compromises. Elias was quiet for a long time. What about profitability? The new contract structure includes a clause that 30% of all profits from Aegis 5 and its derivatives go into a fund. She pulled out the official document. We're calling it the Audrey Turner Memorial Trust for the kids who will fly. His hands trembled. And I'm adding 15% of my personal shares to the fund permanently. She met his eyes. You saved this company. But more than that, you saved me from becoming someone who measured everything by what it cost and nothing by what it was worth. Elias stood and walked to the window. Below, the city glittered with a million lights, each one representing someone trying to build a life, find meaning, survive. I've spent 3 years punishing myself, he said quietly, thinking I didn't deserve to move forward. That giving money to St. Bridget's would somehow balance the scales for what I couldn't save. For Audrey? For all the kids we never got to have together. For Amara growing up without her mother. He turned to face her. Now, I think maybe Audrey would want me to do more than survive. Maybe she'd want me to actually live again. For our daughter. For myself. Slowly, deliberately, Elias lifted the chain from around his neck. Audrey's wedding ring caught the light, gold and eternal. He looked at it for a long moment, then carefully placed it in his pocket, not discarding it, but releasing it. I loved her, he said. I'll always love her. But I think I'm ready to let myself be human again, to make mistakes, to hope. Callista stood, closing the distance between them. I've been afraid my whole life, she confessed. Afraid of being soft, of losing control, of repeating my mother's mistakes. You showed me that strength and compassion aren't opposites. They're partners. What are we doing here, Callista? She smiled, a real smile, nothing calculated or curated. I think we're learning to fly. 1 year later, St. Bridget's Orphanage had been transformed into St. Bridget's Community STEM Center. The old rectory now housed computer labs, robotics workshops, a music room with instruments donated by Sterling employees, and a library filled with aerospace engineering textbooks alongside picture books. Leo, now 11, was presenting his own drone design to a room full of younger children, explaining thrust-to-weight ratios with the enthusiasm of someone who had found his calling. Matilda's artwork covered the walls of the main hall, including a prominent piece titled "The Red Dress in the Blue Sky," showing a tall woman and a black man teaching children to fly. The Aegis 5 had won the National Safety Innovation Award. Trade journals called it the first truly ethical autonomous system. Orders had flooded in, not because it was the fastest or cheapest, but because it was the safest. Companies wanted to be associated with integrity. Sterling Innovations had become profitable again. But more importantly, it had become purposeful. On a clear Saturday afternoon, Callista and Elias stood in the center's courtyard, watching a demonstration of the kids' latest paper airplane competition. Leo's design had incorporated a slight dihedral wing angle that gave it remarkable stability. He was explaining his innovation to anyone who would listen. He's going to be brilliant, Callista said. He already is, Elias replied. We're just giving him permission to show it. Sister Constance approached, carrying a small wooden box. Inside, carefully preserved, were the original letters from Audrey about her dream for this place, a dream that had finally fully come true. She would be proud of both of you, the nun said gently. Elias and Callista stood together, fingers intertwined, not hiding, but not performing either. Their relationship had grown slowly, carefully, built on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than passion alone. Love, they had learned, was most powerful when it served something beyond itself. Later, as the sun began to set, painting the sky in impossible colors, Leo launched his prize-winning plane. It caught an updraft and soared higher than seemed possible for folded paper, gliding on currents only it could feel. "Look how high it's going," Matilda squealed. Elias squeezed Callista's hand, his dark brown fingers warm against her skin. "That's all of them," he said softly. "Every child here, every engineer we've trained to prioritize safety over speed, every decision we've made to choose compassion over convenience, they're all flying." Callista agreed. And somewhere in the space between what was lost and what was found, between grief and hope, between justice and mercy, a black single dad who gave half his paycheck to orphans and a CEO who learned to give all of her heart had built something that would last longer than quarterly reports or profit margins. They had built a legacy measured in the dreams of children who dared to look up at the sky and imagine themselves there, safe, strong, and soaring. The plane finally descended, landing gently in Leo's waiting hands. He grinned up at Elias and Callista, holding his creation like a treasure. "Can we make an even better one next week?" he asked. Elias smiled. "We can always make it better. That's the whole point." As twilight settled over St. Bridget Nam S, the lights inside the center glowed warm against the cooling evening. Laughter echoed from the music room. The smell of Sister Constance's cooking drifted from the kitchen. Children ran through the courtyard, trailing paper airplanes like comets. Callista rested her head on Elias's shoulder, thinking of the little girl waiting for him back home and the lives now tied to the choices they had made. Once she had measured everything by what it cost. Now she measured everything by who it saved. They had learned to fly by teaching others to soar. And in the end, that was the only equation that truly mattered.